Anyway, let's talk about the issue of schools next, and whether or not free school books should extend to private schools. Jennifer Carroll McNeil, the Fine Gael TD, has criticised the exclusion of children in fee-paying schools. Jennifer, why have you decided to intervene here?
Well, I think when this measure was announced in the budget, it was in the minister's statement. It was a new scheme to provide free books for, as she says, all students in primary school. And I have to say, I think it's a phenomenal achievement on her part, and I hugely congratulate her on it. And I know that parents have been looking forward to that, and it's a very important part. It's a very important long-term structural change. But I think what emerged in parliamentary question was that it wasn't in fact for all children, that it was for all children except those in primary schools. And what I've done is I raised the PQ to make sure. I didn't think that they would be excluded, but I'm disappointed to see that they are excluded. But I raised it with Michael McGrath and with the Taoiseach in the Dáil, and Michael McGrath did point out that the scheme is being finalised in the department. So I suppose there's an opportunity now just to reconcile that and make sure that the provision is in fact for all students in primary school.
But a lot of people who are listening right now will say, well, if you can afford fee-paying primary school, then you can afford a couple of €100 max for the books. So it's almost sensible, is it not, to make sure that they are excluded from this scheme?
I think there's a lot of measures that are universal. I mean, child benefit is a universal measure. The free travel scheme which doesn't necessarily apply in Dublin, but applies in lots of other parts of the country, is a universal scheme, and indeed serves fee-paying schools as much as not, because these are different things that parents need. And I raised this in particular in the Gender Equality Committee yesterday, with the Taoiseach in relation to gender budgeting and the additional universal supports that are provided to families, but in particular women who can, who families can face difficulties at any stage of their lives, very significant difficulties at any stage. I think the government's approach is to try to reduce structural costs overall.
I know that.
And to do that in a permanent way. And I think this is a measure that applies to a very small number of schools. There's only 38 schools, but some of those are schools that are denominational schools where there aren't other options. Some of those schools, there are very particular reasons maybe for sending a child there. And I think there's an assumption which I suggest, based on my interaction with different people, that is not always the case, that everybody there has lots of money. That's not always the case. And this is a universal measure and, can be so welcome as a universal measure for all children.
But my point is, universal measures sometimes are not ideal. You think of children's allowance. There's lots of very wealthy people get the children's allowance. You talk about other schemes where people are entitled to it. This might have been an attempt to target it a little bit better, give it to those who are most in need, but arguably use the money then for private school books, a private school and their books to target maybe at more meals in Desh schools. It's not an infinite budget here.
No, that is absolutely hugely important, and that is why there's been huge expansion actually of the hot meal scheme by Minister Heather Humphreys this year, a huge expansion of the back to school allowance scheme, which is targeted at families at lower incomes, an expansion of the working family payment. And I would have been an advocate for all of those things, because the most difficult pressure is just at that, in particular, constituents of mine who are at 40,000, 42,000 euros, who haven't been getting big supports or any supports from the state, who will now benefit from extensions in the working family payment and the ancillary benefits.
And they're all well-targeted measures. But the books here, this particular scheme, I have to put to you, is not one that's going to get huge support for people who are going to fee-paying schools getting free books. It's a weird one on which to go out, if I could put it that way.
Well, I think it's about universality. I mean, you approach it for free books for all students in primary school. There's a universal measure to that. And to suggest that, that there should be anything other than the universality of treatment for children, I think is a bit strange. This is a small group. I don't understand why you would distinguish between those different children, and just simply, apart from anything else, the efficiencies that the department can drive from acquiring books for a larger number of children has the opportunity to have cost-saving measures in that by including the additional numbers in their negotiations with booksellers. So I appreciate the point that you're making, but this is, I think it's I'm on a range of different committees in relation to additional supports for certain children, irrespective of their income. For example, in relation to the autism committee, I'm on, I've advocated very, very strongly around the extension to supports for families, and in particular working families who aren't receiving any other supports. But I think if you're going to approach anything about universality, then you have to do that in every case.
Okay.
And there are certainly children today in fee-paying schools who don't have huge amount of money at home, and that I don't understand why those children would be treated differently when there's such a very small number of them.
Jennifer Carroll O'Neill, thank you very much for joining us this morning with your, McNeil, I beg your pardon, with your thoughts on that, on books and private schools. People who send their children to private schools are not necessarily rolling in money. They choose to spend their money in education. That doesn't mean they've lots of it, so it's only fair they get access to the books, says one texter.
Another listener says wealthy people also send their children to national schools and they can afford books.
Yeah, that's true. Sarah's in Blackrock, I presume in County Dublin, but it could be County Cork, County Louth. Why should private books be excluded? I have a daughter in private school. We work 3 jobs to pay for education. No surplus for holidays, nights out, which we sacrifice. Once again, the workers squeezed. We are the working poor. Better off on the dole, says Sarah. Well, you do have the option of sending your children to other schools where they won't be charged. But that is a choice that you make. And arguably, should you be given the same benefits as children going to those other schools? That is the point that the deputy was making.
Yeah, it's Blackrock, County Dublin, definitely. People from only people from Blackrock, Dublin say Blackrock without saying the county after.
This is true, yeah. Blackrock and Cork, we have to add the Cork part purely because, Cork is better.